Good morning, Bob.
Good morning, Jack.
We haven't chatted in a while, and there's so much going on in the news. We're gonna talk about three things today that are kind of simmering in the background persistently. One, we're going to talk about the latest on pardons. Then we're going to talk about some transparency issues for the executive branch. And then we're going to talk about the law firm cases and how the Trump administration has been handling those. So let's start off with pardons. Just to remind everyone, the president has been on a pardon spree this year. Early on, he pardoned 1,500 individuals related to January 6th. He later pardoned 77 people in connection with challenges to the 2020 election. He has, by some counts, pardoned 30 people for financial crimes, including the crypto Binance founder and Representative Henry Cuellar. And then recently he pardoned the Honduran president, Juan Hernandez, who was in jail on a 45-year sentence for conspiracy to distribute more than 400 tons of cocaine. This at the same time that we're engaged in this boat strike war over illegal drugs into the United States. So, in some sense, you know, this is an acceleration even over Trump's extraordinary first term. And in some sense, I'm not really surprised about the Hernandez or the Cuellar things or the Binance thing. What do you think?
I want to add one to the list, which is he has issued a federal pardon for a state conviction.
Right.
That is for a county election official who was convicted on several counts of assisting a breach in security protocols to support a stop the steal inquiry, in unlawful stop the steal inquiry. And this particular election official is now in prison and has been looking to come out.
In state
And
prison, just to
state prison, yes,
underscore
this
what you said.
state conviction, absolutely state prison. And he has issued what he calls a full pardon. Now, that pardon applies to federal offenses. However, it's interesting to note he has been pressing very, very hard for a state pardon. He would like to see a state pardon. Now, her lawyer takes the position that the pardon power should be read to apply to state convictions as well, and has sent a letter to the president making that case. Now, where Donald Trump wants to take it beyond this, uh, right now it seems like it's just part of a campaign to put pressure on the state of Colorado. Pressure so far the state of Colorado has shown no interest in giving into, or whether there's some other step he wants to take to broaden the understanding of what the president's pardon power is. Unclear, but I just wanted to note that.
It's just not it. But on that score, before you get to the broader points, it's not his call. I mean, first of all, the pardon power doesn't extend there. And second of all, it's not his call as to whether it does. He can issue whatever pardon he wants. And then it's a question of what executive officials in the state and what courts examining it will do. So, I guess the Justice Department could file an amicus brief, but that argument is going nowhere, I think.
I can't imagine it would go anywhere, but it will be interesting to see whether they take it to the next level and sort of incorporate as the constitutional policy of this administration, their position, what the lawyer for this incarcerated election official has had to say on the topic. So my overall reaction to this is, yes, it's a pardon spree. There is no filter as far as anybody can tell. I want to stress this in the case of the pardon of the former president of Honduras, who, as you point out, was convicted for massive drug trafficking and, by the way, related weapons charges to provide support, armed support for drug trafficking activities. And he explained in a November 28 True Social posting that he had heard from people he greatly respected that this particular drug trafficker, the former president of Honduras, had been treated very unfairly and harshly. Who these people are who told him about this unfair treatment is not entirely clear, although it is known, at least according to press reports, that Roger Stone, himself a pardonee and a former aide to a political supporter of President Trump, had provided some avenue for the president of Honduras to make a plea by letter to the president for this pardon. And so the doors are open for political influence and for very, very little in the way of deliberation, explanation, elaboration to the public of why the pardon power in a particular case was exercised. He heard from Roger Stone and potentially others that Hernandez had been treated unfairly, and he went ahead and issued a pardon.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that's important to point out, there's traditionally been a process that runs through the Justice Department that vets these things. Now, presidents have not always followed that, and in recent years, many presidents, I think President Biden at the very end didn't with regard to his family. I'm not sure about that, but the family pardons, but certainly President Trump in the first term broke that process completely. Other presidents at times have not followed that process. Right now, I believe Ed Martin is in charge of the pardon process in the Justice Department, who is someone who is kind of leading the weaponization campaign of the Justice Department. So you're right. There's no process. It sounds like it's whoever gets to the president. The president has said more than a few times, I don't even know that person. I think he said that about the Binance person that he pardoned. That sounds doubtful to me. But it sounds like, if you can get access to him on a good day, he'll sign the paper. I guess I don't understand. I get some of the pardons, the ones that are retribution or ones that he viewed as political vis-a-vis him. I don't understand the pardons for the Honduran. I mean, it seems like politically not great for him to be pardoning the president of Honduras, the former president of Honduras under this circumstance. Some of the financial crime pardons just don't seem to have any political angle at all, other than I think they were convicted during the Biden administration. I mean, is it just random? Is there any political play for that part of the pardons?
Well, in the Hernandez case, former president of Honduras, I don't know that we have a full explanation. Maybe it was simply that this particular president, guided by people who Trump trusts, people he said he greatly respects, managed to, once again tap President Trump's openness to the argument that some people have been treated as unfairly as he has been by a weaponized Department of Justice.
Yeah.
And he said something similar about Congressman Cuellar. He said Congressman Cuellar had been victimized by the Biden administration for speaking out against his border policies. Now, I want to mention one thing about Cuellar. The irony, I guess you could call it an irony, of the president in this instance apparently displaying some bipartisanship in pardoning a Democratic member of Congress. Um, the irony is not lost that when Cuellar then decided he was going to be still run as a Democrat, President Trump lashed out at him and said he had exhibited disloyalty to the president, that he should have shown more loyalty after the president had pardoned him. So it turns out that, in fact, that was an entirely political pardon. He, as you know, is very concerned about loss of the House, and we're in the middle of this huge controversy over mid-decade redistricting. He seemed to have had some thought he could pick up a Republican seat, if you will, or convert a Democratic seat to a Republican seat by pardoning Cuellar and Cuellar exhibiting the requisite loyalty. So this nonpartisan or bipartisan pardon was probably very much a partisan pardon.
Although, just to show how I think this is kind of doesn't make sense, he also pardoned Rod Blagojevich, who wasn't going to run for anything, former Democrat. I think he pardoned the former mayor of Detroit, Democratic mayor of Detroit. So it's something larger than just I agree that Trump was disappointed and angry and kind of had different expectations about Cuellar, but it does seem to have some broader thing going on because he has pardoned some Democrats. What do
I
you
should
think?
mention, by the way, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Got nothing. Go ahead.
I was going to say, as I mentioned in the case of Cuellar, the question is how did he develop this expectation? And because
Yeah.
there's little transparency, he may have had some
Yeah.
reason to believe that Cuellar was going
Yeah,
to.
that's interesting. That's interesting. Yeah, Cuellar said, "You give me a pardon, and I won't run." He got the pardon, decided to run. Nothing Trump can do about it.
Yes.
Okay, let's talk about the transparency issues. There are lots of transparency issues floating around Washington right now, but two of them are the Epstein files. There was a statute passed a few weeks ago, the Epstein Files Transparency Act, which requires DOJ to release most of the files, I think, related to Epstein. I think they're due next Friday, December 19th. There's this exception of sorts for ongoing investigations. So that's one big transparency issue on the horizon. Another one is whether the public or even more members of Congress are going to be able to see the videos and the legal analysis for the September 2nd boat strike, including the follow-on strike. Not clear at all. The House seems to be uh, have closed its investigation. The Senate Armed Services Committee is still open. There's a provision in, I think, the House passed National Defense Authorization Act that cuts into the Secretary of Defense's travel budget if he's not more transparent. those are two pretty important transparency issues. How do you think they're going to play?
At this point, I don't know. I have been very skeptical in the case of Epstein, and I'm also skeptical. I think I've written on both of these points on our sites that we're going to see whatever the administration doesn't want us to see. And in the case of Epstein, let's take it in that order. In the case of Epstein, we had Kash Patel saying recently that he didn't know that there was anything more to be released. And there is the concern he expressed with compromising ongoing investigations. And that is provided for, that is protected, if you will, under the Epstein statute that was passed by the Congress. So there's a word filtering out there that maybe our expectations ought not to be too high and that there are going to be redactions and withholdings. Already, Epstein survivors and Democrats have been calling for the Inspector General to conduct an audit of how the administration has managed those files in the meantime. You recall that in March, there were reports that 1,000 agents had been put on 24-hour shifts to look for any reference to Donald Trump in those materials. And so there's a real question of just what are we going to see? Are we going to see what the administration chooses to put out and then withholds on one claim or the other? I suspect that's without knowing what's being withheld or why. I can't say I know that, but I don't think we're going to be seeing all the Epstein files.
So before we get to the other issue, let me just say something about that. Isn't that a disaster for him politically? I mean, um, if they're not fully transparent in a way that and if the exceptions to the transparency aren't completely credible, doesn't that make the president's situation even worse? Haven't the expectations now been ratcheted up yet more and they've pledged more? It seems to me that they're in a terrible position if they don't have a maximal release.
Part of it probably depends on whether there are other releases elsewhere that raise questions about the fullness or the completeness of the administration's release. In other words, if they're caught out, if you will, because something comes from somewhere, like the estate or on some leak that raises questions about the integrity of the release, of course, that would be catastrophic for the administration. And I do think it's interesting in both the cases that we're talking about, in both the Epstein case and the boat strike case, we have legislative activity with support from Republicans that are putting pressure on the administration on the transparency issue. And this is something he hasn't had to confront before.
Yeah.
And so I do think that they're under an enormous amount of pressure here. But again, how much they give into that pressure depends on what they are protecting against.
Yeah.
And we just don't know.
Yeah. And that leads to on the boat strikes. I just think my sense is from reading the stories, even the Republican claims that there's no there there. My sense is that there is a there there based on these videos. And I don't know about the legal analysis, but the videos and the more recent reporting in the Washington Post a few days ago about the advice that Bradley got about the strikes and the delays before the second strike. And apparently there was at least disagreement among the lawyers, and they wouldn't even commit to what the final legal advice was. Seems to me that there's unattractive stuff there for the administration. I don't see them being transparent there unless their back is completely to the wall, unless they're coerced into doing so. And I don't see that that's going to happen.
I couldn't agree more. I suspect that if these videos were helpful to them, they would have been released days ago,
Yeah.
and they haven't been. And there's been equivocation on the part of Hegseth. The president has said, he who tends to be rather muscular in his pronouncements, that, it's up to Hegseth, and
After saying earlier that he thought that they would be.
that there would be no problem.
Yeah.
And then when that was repeated back to him by a reporter, he became extremely aggressive toward the reporter and denied that he had said that there would be no problem
Right.
releasing that video. And I don't mean to be conspiratorial about this. I could reach back across other administrations and cite other examples. I think it is, vastly worse in this administration. But, and I don't want to use the word cover up, we're not going to see, I think, unless something extraordinary happens here, what they don't want us to see. There are just too many ways that the administration can try to dodge out of the way. And along the way, by the way, toward that end, he does, and this is one thing Trump obviously does very well, what everyone thinks about it. He's a master of distraction. And when heat builds on one front, he creates a distraction on a completely different front and sends everybody chasing in that direction. Whether he can outrace this problem in that fashion here, I don't know, but that is a tactic he has used to great effect in the past.
Yeah. And I'll say on the transparency front, while there hasn't been the opinions opinion or opinions, and the videos haven't been disclosed, but there have been significant leaks and damaging leaks, and they've been ratcheting up. And I expect that that will continue because these things tend to grow on themselves. And that is a form of loss of control that they haven't really suffered much yet either.
I totally agree with that, and I also think, and I'm obviously speculating here. One other problem is that I think Hexas has some dedicated foes within the military establishment and the Pentagon, and the question of his actions here, even his failure to be forthcoming about it now, are weapons that are going to be used against him in an effort to try to weaken his position, if not force him from his position altogether.
Yeah. Okay. Last issue. There have been stories. There was a story a couple of days ago about the law firm, the law firm cases. These are the executive orders. I'll let you describe the executive orders and the state of the law firms. But the bottom line point is that the administration has been slow walking this, and it's these losses. So why don't you explain to us what's going on and why it's significant?
Yes, I think it goes to the question of a use of presidential power that is illegal, but not necessarily wholly ineffective.
Right.
So 9 months ago, I think it's 9 months ago, the first court order against the administration on one of these law firm executive orders was entered. I think in the Perkins Coie case, it's now been 9 months. Uh, and the administration has lost every single one of the cases that have been so far decided on these executive orders. And yet, at the same time, it has been clear from reporting in the law firm trade press that law firms are not eager to have these executive orders issued against them, even though
Yeah.
they know that in the end they're going to win.
Yeah.
There's also been some reporting that some law firms are looking to work with the administration to implement the settlements that he reached with a number of law firms by which they agreed to change some of their policies, say on DEI, but also to provide support for pro bono causes that were important to the administration. So there's been some reporting on that. But the administration's not eager to have the legality of these executive orders fully resolved. So they have not, as they have in other cases, rushed to seek stays or tried to expedite rulings at the appellate level in any way. Rather, they've been more than happy to have delay after delay. Most recently, an additional 45-day delay because the one attorney who apparently is central to the administration's defense of its executive order advised the court that he had a planned paternity leave coming up, so he needed additional time. And the law firms that have been targeted, the law firms who were defendants, by and large, either have taken no position or have agreed to these extensions. So what you have is plainly illegal orders that are out there that probably still have to be taken into account by law firms that don't want to cross the administration. And the administration happy to leave them in place in all of their illegality as we try to find out what precisely firms are doing to fulfill this illegal settle. Let's put it this way: the settlements of the illegal orders that have been issued against them.
Yeah. And we just
Yeah,
to underscore the point in a way, this is also, I think, going on in the Harvard litigation where Harvard has been winning in court. The government has not been rushing for appellate review, certainly an emergency review, certainly not the Supreme Court. And the point is that the main goal is not to win on the law. The main goal is to affect behavior and to change the way law firms act, change the way universities act. And so the law is being used as a tool, even if it's unlawful, even if courts declare it unlawful, the administration can go slow on the appeal because it doesn't matter. They're still imposing costs in virtue of just having the program out there. Harvard is spending an
absolutely.
enormous amount of money defending these cases and investigations and the like. The law firms are as you suggest, and I don't know the full scale of what they're doing, but they're certainly worried about these EOs, worried about crossing the administration. These are all wins for the administration, whether they win in court or not. That's the important point, I think.
Absolutely. And in the meantime, we don't know much about what's actually taking place in pursuant to these settlements. There have been lawsuits filed to try to disgorge from the administration details, more information about what precisely has transpired between the administration and the firms that decided to settle these illegal orders. But those are relatively recent, and it's not clear where they're going to go. So this is a depressingly effective tool that the administration has been using to try to cast a pall or like to introduce some intimidation into the law firm community. And again, if you look at the trade press, it does appear there are law firms that indeed are litigating against interests of the administration, but there's a lot of cautiousness among the largest law firms that do not want to face these executive orders.
Okay, I think we'll stop there. I hope you have a great weekend.
You too. Thanks.